please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
This is a very important breaking news. The IRDA has approved, and we well know that there are a couple of rules of insurance regulator itself that that are not met by this case. The IRDA normally wants its insurance companies not to have more than a 15% exposure in any one company as a matter of pure safety. And the second rule is that one insurance company cannot own another insurance company. But by buying a big stake in IDBI Bank, LIC indirectly becomes the owner of IDBI Federal Insurance Company, about 20% stake, if indeed LIC has bought a 40 to 50% stake in IDBI Bank. So two rules being overlooked or being given forbearance for LIC. Well, Shireen is also with me. Shireen, go ahead. This looks like one regulator has extended forbearance to the LIC-IDBI deal.
I don't think there was absolutely no doubt about this, Lata. As we've been reporting for the last several days now, it was a foregone conclusion that the regulatory approval from the IRDA was going to be in the bag. That was the sense that we had already got from the government, that IRDA was on board with this plan. But perhaps we should put that question to our guest now. Mr. Purwar, let me start by asking you, sir, what do you make of this plan? I mean, the rationale of the government is, look, LIC has had banking aspirations. We don't want to sell IDBI Bank to a private bank at this stage, even though there have been proposals to the government from at least two private sector banks. Why should we sell IDBI Bank cheap to a private sector player, is the government's argument. Why not give this to LIC? And that's how they've structured this. And the first regulatory approval has come in from the IRDA. Now, of course, we require the RBI to come in, and of course, cabinet approval will be required as well. What do you make of this, Mr. Purwar?
Well, if you ask me purely as a banker, my assessment is that IDBI started as a long-term lending institution, and they all focused on providing long-term funds to a whole host of industries. They, in fact, in 2002, 2003, when I was the chairman, and when initially IDBI ran into some issues, I offered to buy IDBI out. Unfortunately, for some reason, this did not mature. But the rationale was that the IDBI had huge domain expertise in appraisal of long-term loans. Barring stray cases, and because of the economy position and all, the NPAs have gone up substantially. But having said that, the domain expertise resides in IDBI even today. If you look at LIC, LIC is having a whole host of long-term, very long-term funds. And I think it's an excellent cultural mix. And,
so you're not unhappy with the mix?
I am very happy with the mix.
Oh, really? I've not heard too many people supporting it. And one of them who opposed it is, I think, joining us now. Mr. Gopalan, former finance secretary, has joined us on the phone line. Mr. Gopalan, looks like the first hurdle has been crossed. IRDA has cleared the LIC IDBI Bank deal.
As Shireen said, it was expected. And obviously, it will also go through once again with SEBI as well as with the RBI. That also will get the clearance.
Oh, you think all three regulators will consider it kosher?
Absolutely. I mean, I have a feeling that it's going to be cleared by everyone, because if the decision has been taken to do this, it'll go through all the regulatory approvals. But it's going to be a great strain on the regulators. Three regulators making exception in one single case is unheard of in history. But okay, I mean, those are all things for what do you call the learned people to look into, do a research and find out how this is and things like that. But Mr. Purwar is a very senior man. I have a lot of respect for him. If he says that, I mean, the kind of appraisal requirements or appraisal capabilities are still in IDBI, I'll be very happy. Unfortunately, that, I mean, has been eroded very badly in the last few years, and therefore, if that is the only issue for which IDBI is acquired by LIC, I look at the LIC's health also, financial health also. Now, you are taking over an organization, 55,000 crores. I mean, NPA is 28%. I mean, gross NPA is there in the bank there. And you have to put in a good amount of cash. Now, these are all policyholders' money. And policyholders' money has to have, ability to, liquidate and then pay them whenever there is a requirement to pay. So, you are putting in this money in IDBI. I'm not sure how long this will get the return from this bank as we go along.
Yeah.
And IDBI can,
just a second, Mr. Gopalan. One second. Let me get Mr. Purwar. Let me get Mr. Purwar to respond to that, because you've been opposing this transaction. Mr. Purwar is supporting this transaction. Mr. Purwar, on the point that's being raised there by Mr. Gopalan, that look, this is policyholders' money. IDBI Bank has seen a loss of 5,700 crores in the last quarter. It's one of the worst performing banks in the landscape today. Why would the government want to broker such a transaction? And LIC doesn't have expertise to run a bank, let alone a bank in a shape as IDBI finds itself in.
Well, Mr. Gopalan, in some way, I would respect his opinion in the sense that, well, policyholders' money is a money where you have to return back at a time of maturity. Yes, that's a very genuine issue. But having said that, let's look at the nature of fund which LIC has. 20-year fund, 25-year fund, 50-year funds, where the returns generally being given by LIC, although it's a very respected organization, extremely credible organization. But in terms of percentage of returns, well, we know it's very close to 10-year bond yield, or maybe less, sometimes little above 10-year bond yield.
Mr. Purwar, does LIC have a very good record of running a mutual fund?
Yeah.
It's not the best run mutual fund.
So,
does it have a great record of running a housing finance company? LIC Housing Finance doesn't compare to HDFC, doesn't compare to, maybe even Growth Finance. So, do you really think that LIC will do a great job of running a bank?
To be candid with you, unless and until we give them an opportunity to run the bank. And I would put it this way, there is a substantial amount of expertise available in the market, and LIC, I'm sure, must have tapped a lot of senior bankers or small bankers to help them run the show. Look at the present MD.
Sriram has been appointed.
Sriram is one of the very capable SBI officers. Has experience of running a state bank, large credit portfolio for a long time and very successfully, even in these difficult markets. So if they recruit proper people, I'm sure that they should be able to do it.
Okay. Okay, you're saying that they should be given an opportunity. Mr. Omarji, do you believe with Mr. Purwar that yes, LIC should be given the opportunity, and this is perhaps the best way forward, that the government could get IDBI Bank out of its mess and in fact not have to put in additional capital into IDBI Bank and make it LIC's problem?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Purwar. You see, LIC has an investment in so many other banks along with this new bank which they are investing, and they have the very long-standing experience in dealing with banks and other financial institutions. And the only issue involved in this is protecting the interest of the policyholders, protecting the interest of the depositors of IDBI Bank. As far as IDBI Bank depositors are concerned, there is no issue. As far as policyholders are concerned, because you are exceeding the exposure levels in investments, there is a slight relaxed deviation from that norm, but that's after due consideration by the regulator, and it will be, I mean, the LIC will ensure that the affairs of the corporation are managed in such a way that the policyholders' interests are not affected.
Okay. Well, Mr. Omarji.
Okay. So let me take that. Let me take that to sorry. Yeah, let me just take that to Mr. J.N. Gupta, because one regulator has now given the nod for this deal. SEBI's nod will also be expected and awaited. What we are given to understand is, and the way that the government has thought this through, is that it will operate as a subsidiary, just like LIC Housing Finance and so on and so forth. But J.N. Gupta, let me ask you this. You know, the point was raised there that LIC sits on the boards of so many other banks, has an investment in a whole bunch of other banks, and perhaps that gives it needed some sort of expertise to be able to take IDBI Bank forward. But what about LIC's holding in all of these banks now that it will be the owner of IDBI Bank?
See, I think I have been listening to everybody's opinion. My opinion is very simple. Let us look into it as a simple investment rather than anything else complex. I don't think LIC is going to run this bank on day-to-day basis as a promoter. The bank will continue to be run as a professional because till now government was owning 88% or 86% of the equity, and the bank was being run by the management. So there was, of course, I do not know, but I would say that there was no day-to-day interference by government on policy. Now, if that is the case, and as Mr. Purwar said, Mr. Shriram is an excellent person, and he has got a very good reputation and experience. So in that case, I don't think there is any issue at all if we look at it as an investment. But the moment we bring many dimensions, that deal looks very difficult. So that because the
it is not an investment, sir. The government is clear. The government is clear. This is an acquisition. It is not an investment.
I agree. Acquisition, and I would put it another way, it will continue to work like a subsidiary of LIC as LIC Housing Finance is being done.
Okay.
But again, the question that has been raised on the decision of LIC to get into this, and I would say that we as an analyst, we can never have the vision that investment team on LIC would have had. It could be a wrong decision, a right decision, we would never know. But I would say that many times it will the stress attached which can give you a long-term return. And as Mr. Purwar said, that LIC is a very, very long-term investor. Now, if in 5 years, 10 years' time, they cannot turn this bank around, then because I see that today the banking sector is in a very, very bad shape. And if we do not see any light at the end of the 10 years or 5 years, I think we are in sore trouble.
Okay. Mr. Gupta, I would admit that LIC has holding power, but LIC has had no record of turning around any management at all. They don't even interfere with most managements that they take. They just sit and wait, and some of them turn good. But Mr. Umarji, I just wanted to ask you a legal point. So far, how has Reserve Bank approached, one bank holding stake in another bank or one shareholder holding stake in two banks? The philosophy normally has been that if you are owning one bank, then you can't have more than 4 or 5% stake, more than 4.9% stake in another bank. It can only be a financial investment. And that bears reason because you can't be sitting in the boards of other banks and own a bank yourself. That certainly looks like conflict, doesn't it, Mr. Umarji?
No, but I don't think in any other bank the LIC has controlling interest.
No, but it is a shareholder. It has a board seat. It has a board seat in Axis. It has a board seat in ICICI. It has board seat in Corporation Bank.
The RBI will have to look into this aspect, whether it should be allowed and whether it will adversely affect the working of any bank as a result of the same person controlling different banks. It may involve issues of competition also, I don't know. RBI will have to look into this aspect and give a clearance.
Okay. Well, the other issue that as a regulator, Mr. Umarji, whether this would occur to RBI, if government had held on to IDBI, it would have bought capital. Probably it would have brought in 10,000 crores or 11,000 crores or 8,000 crores to capitalize IDBI. So, for this much of leverage, you have that much of shareholder capital. Now, LIC is capitalized only to the extent of 100 crores. And that as a subsidiary is with its profit going to, or with its policyholders' income going to capitalize IDBI. So, in the system as a whole, capital is not going to increase, although leverage is very high. Is not that a financial stability issue? Mr. Umarji?
No, LIC will be contributing capital to IDBI. No?
Without its own capital increasing, is my point.
No, but it has funds available, so those funds will be utilized for the purpose of investment in IDBI.
Okay.
So that should not be any problem in that.
Okay, we've also, let me get a quick word in from Mr. Gopalan before I go across to Prabal Basu Roy, Management Advisor, who joins us from Bangalore. Mr. Gopalan, what would you now expect by way of the questions that the other two regulators may ask? We raised some of these issues about conflict and so on and so forth, but what would you now expect, because at least one significant hurdle has been crossed?
You see, as far as the SEBI is concerned, this offer to making an open offer beyond this 26%, the 25% open offer has to be made, and that SEBI has powers to waive. They waived in a few cases.
Waive,
So that should not be an issue.
SpiceJet was one where we saw the waiver being given.
Yes. My only problem is the regulator, banking regulator, will have a lot of issues to deal with and grapple with before this is being, before permission is given. Kind of restrictions they may put in for the purpose of financial stability, whatever they would put in, we need to see whether that is going to affect the free ability of IDBI Bank to function. So the kind of restrictions which RBI as a regulator, in the interest of financial stability, may put in, one needs to see how that is going to impact the function of the IDBI Bank. We'll have to wait and see on that particular.
Okay.
I am presuming that RBI will also clear it. I am presuming that RBI will also clear it. But when they clear it, in the interest of the financial stability, the kind of conditions they are going to put in, one needs to see how that is going to impact
the kind of conditions in that.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, Prabal Basu Roy, let me go across to you as well. You've been writing a scathing piece on LIC taking up IDBI Bank. It's at least going through, so it seems IRDA has given the green signal, and now the other two regulators' nod is expected. Prabal.
Well, Shireen, I have not been on top of this in the last couple of hours. So if IRDA has given, but I had no doubt that IRDA will be sort of asked to give its consent on this. The primary issues that I raised were effectively, which probably everyone else has, which is to do with the conflict of interest with respect to the existing stakeholders of IDBI, which are the policy holders, and using their funds, which is their funds in perpetuity. That funds is going for some for basically investments which in all probability will not generate returns. Basically, that's the issue. So if they're going ahead with it, yes.
So let me just add to what
how independent our regulators are as well.
Okay, I just want to add to what we are being given to understand that this stake buy is going to happen in tranches, and LIC may not necessarily be given management control in IDBI Bank. Mr. Purwar, what do you anticipate could be the restrictions that we just heard from Mr. Gopal, and that the banking regulator may in fact impose before giving its nod to this deal?
You see, the issues about the conflict of interest being raised, and as Lata has very rightly said, RBI, LIC sits on the board of some of the banks. Well, these are very genuine issues. And my assessment, my feeling is that perhaps RBI would like to stipulate that wherever they are sitting on the board, they have to, in a given period of time, 2 years, 3 years, they have to reduce their shareholdings and come out of those boards. Okay. So as to ensure that they remain focused only on IDBI Bank. That is one thing which I expect should happen. The other could be that, well, there could be some issues on the management side of IDBI where LIC is now going, in due course, would be acquiring controlling interest. But in the interim, there has to be a person running IDBI professionally and soundly till LIC acquires controlling interest. Okay. And I think the selection of Mr. Sriram for this purpose, in my view, is extremely appropriate.
No, I don't think questions are being raised about Sriram. That is the nice part of the decision making. We are raising questions about LIC as the owner. Mr. Prabal Basu Roy, let me come to you on this. See, if you were Prudential ICICI, or if you were HDFC Chubb or HDFC Standard Life, and you want to have a banking partner, would you choose IDBI? I mean, that gives the impression that LIC is actually getting imposed with IDBI rather than, choosing it out of its own free volition?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is the prime issue. Effectively, Lata, you have hit it right on the head. That is the prime issue, and that is precisely the reason why public sector banks or public sector institutions in India get such low multiples consistently in the markets, because nobody knows what's going to be the fate of the funds which these companies generate for a particular stake of shareholders. Absolutely, and there will be conflict of interest, like we've always said. Yes, but bang on.
We've also got Mr. V.G. Kannan of the IBA joining us. Mr. Kannan, appreciate you joining us. The IRDA has given the clearance to the LIC-IDBI bank deal. Mr. Kannan, do you believe that this is in fact the best way forward? And what concerns would you have, if any, with respect to this transaction?
First of all, I'm a bit surprised that IRDA has given the approval, because hitherto I thought both the bankers holding the LIC insurance company and insurance company holding a bankers was not really acceptable. Second thing is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, IDBI also has a mutual fund. So you're going to have a scenario that the LIC has also a mutual fund. Now that they're going to become majority owner in IDBI, they're also going to have a mutual fund. Are they going to get merged? One. Second thing, they also have a stake in UTI also, which is a third mutual fund. So you're going to have a scenario where SEBI also will come into picture, saying that they are effectively having stake in 3 mutual funds. So that is one portion I'm looking at. Second thing is whether LIC does have any experience in becoming a pure investor, or is it going to manage the bank? That I'm not too sure, whether they have the capabilities to run a bank, and that we have to see. These are some of my concerns which we have. Of course, the government will be appointing someone, because in effect it is basically continues to be a public sector organization in as much as LIC is a government owned. Therefore, we will probably have someone from the government, some government nominee running the bank. And in what way will it improve the capital? Whether the investment is going to come way of additional funding, or will it be only sale of the existing shares to the LIC? I think the moralities has to be seen as to whether it's going to be a fresh infusion, or is it going to be only a sale of the government share to LIC. In which case, if it's a government share to LIC, then it does not improve the capital of the particular bank.
Mr. Kannan, a very quick question. Some of the concerns that you raised have been raised by others as well, who of our panelists who are here with us on the show. But do you believe that, or would you anticipate that there could be a legal challenge to this transaction?
I'm not sure whether there will be a legal challenge, but there could be some others also quoting this as a precedent to take over. And maybe sometime later you might have some other institutions like the New India Insurance taking over some South Bank or North Bank. And you'll probably have in future the insurance companies running banks. World over, we have seen banks and insurance companies working together, and mostly the bankers owning some stake in the insurance companies. An insurance company as an investor doing it, but not as a majority owner. This probably, if I'm not mistaken, maybe one of the rare occasions where insurance company becomes the majority owner in a bank, which I'm a bit concerned about.
Yeah, so the other point I wanted to raise with you, Mr. Purwar, what will be your mindset if you are a CGM in IDBI Bank? I mean, until now you were told that, you had Mr. Kharath as your managing director about 12 months back. And then you got suddenly another managing director, Mr. M.K. Jain from Indian Bank. The very next day they were put under prompt corrective action. So if you got a great banker to run, then the next day you're put under prompt corrective action. And now you are not a government bank, you are supposedly owned by LIC. And you are being told it's only a financial investment. They will look to improve you and sell you off to perhaps another investor, at a higher price, because the government thinks the current price is low. Do you think a banker can perform well under such a circumstance?
I look at it, let me go back to history a little bit. I'm being an aged person. LIC always had the ambition of having a bank. So by getting an IDBI hold in IDBI, they realized one of the very cherished old ambition of owning a bank.
Do you? If you were LIC chairman and you always wanted to own a bank, would you buy IDBI Bank? Would you be happy that you have got IDBI Bank?
Yeah, there are challenges. But I would put it this way, that even this bank can be turned around. Basically, the bank is, in terms of human skills, is, I would say...
If you were the chairman of LIC and you had a choice that I want to build a bank, would you buy, would you say that, give me more stake in Corporation Bank? Or would you say, let me buy, say, IndusInd Bank? Or let me buy, you know, would IDBI be your choice?
If I am LIC chairman, I would definitely like to opt for IDBI, simply because of the nature of business. As LIC as a long-term funds. And IDBI basically is an organization historically which has been deploying.
So you think that there is synergy in business?
Definitely.
Yeah, Shireen?
Okay, let me go across to Amit Tandon as well. Amit, what do you make of this? One regulator is saying, all right, go ahead. We will wait to see what the other regulators will say about this proposed transaction.
Well, I've kind of come into the conversation late, so I don't know how much has been said, how much has not been said, but my sense is that the regulators will all be in sync at this stage. There might be a little bit of tweaking around. We need to remember that the decision to house IDBI Bank at a with a safe pair of hands or with someone with deep pockets was actually taken by RBI or initiated by the Reserve Bank of India. The issue they had was that it was IRDA which might become a bottleneck in terms of this happening. So if IRDA is given the approval, I think RBI is going to be on board with this.
Okay, so you don't anticipate any regulatory hurdles, but what precedent does this throw up? I mean, it looks very, very clear that, of course, the IRDA has made exceptions as far as this particular transaction is concerned, and maybe the other two regulators will make exceptions, including SEBI, by way of the waiver of the open offer. What kind of a precedent does that set then for the larger corporate landscape?
Well, my sense is that as far as government-owned entities is concerned, they are kind of got carve-outs throughout. So whether it is in open offer, which we saw in the case of ONGC, HPCL, or whether you see in terms of earlier it was women on boards, whether it was in terms of the board composition, whether it is in a whole series of things. Therefore, there have been carve-outs for the government-owned entities, and this is just a continuation. Maybe it's far more extensive than what has been given, where you've kind of got some administrative fixes in the others. But you know, if we go back to the ONGC HPCL transaction, our belief was that merging the two entities might make sense, but not the way they had envisaged the structure at that stage. Again, here there might have been some other solutions. Maybe they could have merged it with one bank or split it up. I don't know what, really not jumped deep into it, so I have a very strong view. But I think the challenge now is for LIC to think its own ownership role in IDBI Bank versus the other banks through. I did hear a comment in terms of whether they'll still have nominees on other banks or they'll not have. And clearly it's not something for RBI, though they will have a say, but it's also for LIC to think about this. The fact that they've got a slew of investment in other banks. Where are they an investor? Where are they an owner? How are they going to make a distinction between these two roles? Will they then, by virtue of being a significant owner in some of the other banks, try and push a merger? And maybe that is what has been left unsaid at this moment by the government of India, that this might be an easy way to kind of start a consolidation within the government-owned banks. Really don't know. It could actually go in many directions at this stage.
Oh, you mean, Mr. Tandon, since LIC owns a substantial stake in Corporation Bank and now will own probably 40% to start with in IDBI Bank, they could perhaps arrange the merger? You think that that could be a logical step?
Well, you know, they could actually start pressing for it, assuming that they're convinced about it and they have some headroom on this. But you know, once you've got some significant shareholders and it's government and it's government-owned LIC, it becomes a little bit easier to kind of push through some of these decisions. But really, My experience in all these years has been to never try and second guess what the people in North Block are thinking about.
Okay. Mr. Umarji, I don't know how conversant you are with the IDBI Act.
Nothing to do.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Shri.
No, I was just saying, Amit said that he's learned not to second guess what North Block does, and I said that's a smart strategy to have, Lata.
No, well, in this case, I guess it's very easy to guess the intention. If it's going to be a preferential offer of shares to LIC for sure, they're not buying the government stake because IDBI needs capital, and maybe an extra 30% of shares are going to be issued to LIC, which will bring in some 8,000 odd crores. I think Yash, our correspondent who's sitting with us patiently, actually gave us
about
those.
13,000, yeah.
Yeah, so about 13,000 crores, Yash? 13,000 crores is going to be coming in as capital from LIC in the form of their buying new shares issued. But Mr. Umarji, assuming that LIC gets 40% initially and maybe in tranches even raises the stake further to 50, what happens to decisions of appointment of CEO, appointment of board, appointment of management, lateral recruits into IDBI? Do all this become any easier? Who takes the shots? Would you know the laws that govern IDBI?
It depends on the extent of shareholding of the government. If government continues to hold more than 51%, it will control all the appointments and other policy decisions. But there is one difference between IDBI and other public sector banks. You see, all the public sector banks are corporations established under an act of parliament.
Yes.
But IDBI is a company.
Under Companies Act, yes.
Company registered under the Companies Act. And IDBI Act was repealed and it was converted into a company. So it is governed by the company law. So, and therefore the system of appointments and all that is different from other public sector banks.
So does it become legally
regulated
easier?
by the company law.
Yeah, no, my point therefore is, sir, does it therefore become legally now easier? Let us assume that after you issue 30% more shares, LIC stake increases beyond what Government of India holds. In that case, do you think it is easier to bring lateral recruits into IDBI?
Correct.
Okay.
It will be easier for LIC to manage it directly without consulting central government at every step.
Okay.
As a subsidiary of their own company, they will be able to manage.
Okay. Prabal, is that also your thought? Sorry, Mr. Roy. You think it becomes almost like a private bank?
No, LIC is a government.
I wish it was, Lata. In fact, that has been the subject matter of...
Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Roy.
That has been the subject matter of my... that has been the subject matter of my main concern with respect to this deal, is that, this is a financial restructuring of this nature. They have certain issues, all that is, we have discussed. But primarily, what are we changing in the bank? The bank, the fact that it has practically no tier 1 capital, if you make all the provisions, etc. Then, obviously there has been issues of management in this. I mean, for various reasons. The reasons we can get into, it's well known. But what are we doing to actually inculcate a completely new management to turn this around? Unless that basic business is in place, it won't happen. So in this case, frankly, even though legally, like the earlier speaker, he rightly said, you can do it, but does even LIC have the wherewithal to do it? I frankly don't know. Whether they will have the wherewithal to run a company and effect a turnaround of this magnitude on its own. They're all, after all, run out of North Block. In various forms and shapes, they run out of North Block. So, the sort of innovative thinking which is necessary to turn around something of this nature, I'm not very hopeful, frankly, at this stage.
Okay. Shireen?
Right. Mr. Purwar, what would you now expect in terms of next steps? Once the regulatory approvals are out of the way, if this has got to work, sir, of course, you've reposed your faith and confidence in Mr. Sriram being there. But outside of, Mr. Sriram trying to sort of take things forward, what would you expect in terms of next steps?
Will have to be completely restructured. LIC will definitely would like to try to bring in some outside professionals with proven track record in the banking industry. They would like to bring in their own nominees so that they could have a direct oversight over the entire affairs of the bank. You say I tell you it's a very difficult decision. But having said that, I think in today's scenario, perhaps this is the best decision which could have been taken.
Okay, well, Shireen, let me intervene at this point. You think good independent directors will have the courage to join IDBI Bank board? Sir, 3 independent board members were charge sheeted for the Aircel loan. Come back to the original debate we had.
Let me tell you that in the system there are a lot of fearless people who can take positions and take very independent stance. But you know, you have to look for those people, that's all.
Well, I think those fearless people took the position and they have been charge sheeted for a loan over which they could not have had any control.